Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Susan Spencer reporting. Israel today said no deal to terrorist demands that it free 400 Palestinian prisoners in return for 4 Beirut University professors kidnapped last weekend. One official called the idea of a trade unthinkable. Meanwhile, there are reports tonight of intense hush-hush talks among Syria, Iran, and Lebanese militia leaders to determine the fate of hostage negotiator Terry Waite. Whereabouts still unknown. Doug Tennell has more.
In Lebanon today, the British Embassy continued the search for the Church of England's hostage negotiator Terry Waite, while in England, the Archbishop of Canterbury said Waite had long made clear what should not be done if he were ever taken hostage.
Should anything happen to him, he wouldn't want money or people to be exchanged for him in that way.
But an exchange is exactly what one group of kidnappers holding 3 American hostages asked for last night. The so-called Islamic Jihad for the Liberation of Palestine released these pictures of American hostages Alan Steen and Jesse Turner, accompanied by a dangerous ultimatum. Release 400 prisoners in Israel within the next week, or else, the statement warned, the hostages will be killed. In Jerusalem, Israeli officials publicly ruled out any bargain.
You should not give or accept their conditions. Otherwise, we are going to promote terrorism instead of fighting it.
But ever since the TWA hijacking in 1985, there has been a precedent for just the kind of hostage-for-prisoner swap the kidnappers are demanding. 40 Americans were freed in exchange for the phased release of several hundred Lebanese and Palestinian prisoners in Israel. Israeli Defense Minister Yitzhak Rabin today said no new deal was in the works so far.
There is no any request or any contact that was made by the United States government to Israel.
But the kidnappers' deadline is still 6 working days away. It's exactly the kind of hostage crisis Terry Waite is expert in negotiating. But Waite has now been missing in Lebanon, too, for 12 full days. Doug Tennell, CBS News, Damascus.
Secretary of State George Shultz says the U.S. should be prepared to use military force against hostage takers, quote, when we have a clear target and when we know what we're doing. That comment came in an interview with U.S. News and World Report. Finding out who in the White House knew what about the Iran-Contra scandal may take investigators where the administration feels they have no right at all to go, into the president's personal notes. Jacqueline Adams has that story.
The White House today confirmed that President Reagan does occasionally make handwritten notes on his private and official activities, notes which he consulted prior to his only lengthy question-and-answer session on the Iran-Contra scandal, a 75-minute meeting with his Tower Commission. The Senate Select Committee investigating the Iran controversy may want to see those notes, although there's been no discussion of that yet. But one member, Democratic Senator George Mitchell, believes the committee should have access to the notes, although he is willing to let a third party review them to determine whether they're relevant or not. The White House view, though, is that the notes are strictly private, that all the committee's questions will be answered in testimony. Both Mitchell and the White House agree that it's premature to discuss whether executive privilege will be invoked to keep the notes private. But former White House spokesman Larry Speakes believes the president is leaning that way.
But I think he would be mindful of any precedent he might set in binding future presidents. But other than that, I think he'd be as open as he could be.
We will get to the bottom of this, and I will take whatever action is called for.
Tonight, Senate sources are waiting to see whether President Reagan really means it. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, the White House.
The Senate report on the Iran-Contra affair outlines an Israeli role in weapons shipment to the rebels of Nicaragua, a role that Israel today flatly denied. Bob Simon reports.
Israel lifted its shield of silence just a bit today, just enough to shoot off a few arrows towards Washington, towards the Senate committee, and the charge that Israel was involved in the Contra connection.
Israel reaffirms that it had no knowledge and was not a party in any way in the alleged diversion of Iranian funds to the Contras.
But what about arms to the Contras? The report alleged that Defense Minister Rabin proposed to Washington that Israel ship captured Soviet bloc weapons to the Nicaraguan rebels. Rabin had a few words to say about that.
What is attributed to me is a total nonsense. In the Contras' hands, there is no arms that came from Israel.
But a leading Israeli newspaper reported today that a ship carrying Russian rifles destined for the Contras actually left Israel last fall, but was told to return to port immediately when Iran Gate exploded in Washington. The paper reports that the ship only sailed after repeated requests from Oliver North. It's this kind of revelation that keeps Jerusalem concerned. Denials may be the order of the day here, but off the record, officials are worried that Israel's standing in Congress is being damaged, and that it may be tough going when the time comes for guns and funds to be voted for Israel. Bob Simon, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
In just a moment, we'll see how black civil rights activists returned again to Georgia's Forsyth County, this time to pray. And on this 8th anniversary of the Ayatollah's homecoming, we'll take a look at how much life in revolutionary Iran has changed.
A Valentine's Day poem from Hallmark. Roses are red, violets are blue. Buy your Valentine's at Hallmark. Get a free bracelet, too. Remember Mom and Grandma and the sweeties met? Remember all your Valentines and get a bracelet. Limit 1 per customer while supplies last. When you care enough to send the very best. Only at participating Hallmark stores.
When it's cold and rough outside, try something warm and creamy inside. Cream of wheat hot cereal and instant mix and eat. Their smooth texture always lets the flavor come through. 2 great ways to come in from the cold.
Former Soviet dissident Anatoly Sharansky has taken part in his first anti-Soviet demonstration since he was freed in a prisoner swap last year. He joined hundreds of other protesters outside the Soviet consulate in San Francisco today. Sharansky called on American and Israeli Jews to pressure Moscow for the immediate release of all political prisoners. Black civil rights activists from Atlanta returned to all-white Forsyth County, Georgia today, not by the thousands as last weekend, and not to march, but rather to pray. James McManus was there.
They burned the school down last night.
This time, fewer than 100 blacks gathered at the tomb of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Their leader said they would worship in Forsyth County and meet the good people there.
I don't want to look upon this venture as a demonstration. I'm not a religious nut.
This time, in the small town of Cumming, Georgia, only a handful of law enforcement officers showed up, mainly to direct traffic. The churches opened their doors in welcome. In fact, there were not enough black worshipers to go around in Forsyth County this morning. The Confederate flag went by a couple of times, and a few shouted insults from motorists were ignored.
It was really great.
Baptist preacher Hosea Williams went to the First Baptist Church.
He preached what I call a good Baptist sermon. We ought to love others as God loves us.
I think it went very well, and I hope they will come back. They're perfectly welcome.
It was the same across town at the First Methodist Church.
Good to have you today. Thanks for coming back anytime. We enjoyed the welcome very much.
That's good to hear. We enjoyed having y'all.
This is a lot better than the last 2 times I was here.
Reverend Williams said today's experience did something positive for black attitudes toward Forsyth County. But he warned that if a list of black political demands are not met soon, he'll call for another mass demonstration. James McManus, CBS News, Cumming, Georgia.
California Democrats wrapped up a 3-day convention in Sacramento today. CBS News political correspondent Bruce Morton reports the atmosphere was nothing like it was at their last get-together.
And so I stand here with you today, confident of our victory. Thank you very much.
Confidence is one difference from when California Democrats held their convention 4 years ago. Then all the presidential candidates showed up. There were a lot, you remember. And there was an official straw poll won by favorite son Alan Cranston, whose presidential candidacy probably peaked that day. This time, a lot of possible candidates were elsewhere. Gary Hart opening a headquarters in Iowa. Richard Gephardt at a congressional retreat in West Virginia. The Los Angeles Times did poll 88% of the delegates before they got here. and found they thought Gary Hart would be the strongest candidate, though their personal first choice was New York Governor Mario Cuomo. But unannounced candidate Joseph Biden of Delaware was a big hit with the delegates, giving an emotional Kennedy-style speech urging excellence in education.
Gentlemen here said it costs money. You're damn right it costs money. Excellence costs. It costs in every way.
And research to keep U.S. technology competitive.
We must have an economy driven by a technological supremacy that stamps the information age with the label, Made in America.
Jesse Jackson, the only other hopeful here, urged blacks and whites to unite on economic issues.
The symbol must not be a piece of parlor in New York or a lonely road in Georgia. The focus must be the plant gate where workers from Howard Beach and Harlem have a common agenda, where labor and church meet.
Some delegates were sorry there weren't more candidates here, but candidates and managers, while they come to California to raise money, are concentrating now on working the early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, the South. California's primary is late. The tactics have changed since 1983. No question the biggest difference between this convention and the one 4 years ago is the mood of optimism here. The Democrats think they have the issues and a genuine chance at winning the White House. The California Young Democrats have even put out a frisbee. Soaring to the White House, it's marked 1988. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Sacramento.
Now that their 6-month-long contract dispute is settled, thousands of United Steelworkers will return to their jobs at U.S. X Corporation tomorrow. But because of poor business conditions, it'll still be some time before thousands of others are called back to work. Still ahead tonight, the growing use of lasers in medicine.
The longer, newly styled 1987 Cadillac DeVille. It's capable of delivering more than luxury. With its available anti-lock braking system, today's technology is employed to enhance driver control. From four-wheel independent suspension to the traction of front-wheel drive, DeVille inspires confidence, as does its new longer warranty. Yet it always reminds you of why you chose Cadillac in the first place. DeVille, the contemporary spirit of Cadillac.
Dad?
Oh, Julie, look at your hay fever.
Oh, she hasn't had a sniffle all day. And I'm ready to dance all night.
Thanks to research by Dow's pharmaceutical subsidiary, millions like Julie may now find relief from allergies without the drowsiness often associated with allergy treatments.
You can make a difference in what tomorrow brings.
Save me a dance.
'Cause Dow lets you do great things.
Had enough calcium today? Need more? Introducing another Rolaids, calcium-rich cherry Rolaids, a great antacid plus calcium. New calcium-rich Rolaids, relief you want, calcium you need.
If you're allergy sensitive, cold symptoms can make your winter attacks feel even worse. For relief, discover Benadryl Decongestant. With Benadryl, the most prescribed allergy medication ever, plus a nasal decongestant. Benadryl Decongestant.
Score another victory for Stars and Stripes in the America's Cup. The American yacht overcame a shaky start to beat Australia again for a 2-0 lead in the best-of-7 finals. But U.S. skipper Dennis Conner held the same lead in 1983 when, of course, the Aussies rallied to win the Cup. A congressional report out today says that state work programs are not getting the funds they need to train people for good jobs. As a result, the study says many welfare recipients are placed in low-paying jobs and forced to stay on public assistance. As the American population ages, more and more families are looking for help in caring for an elderly relative. Now, as Frank Courier reports, they have a new option to consider.
Time was when the only choice for most of these people was no choice, a nursing home. But today there's a new step to the old song and dance called adult daycare, and it's catching on.
I like everybody here. I like people. The more people I see, the better I like it.
In what more and more families say is the best alternative to nursing homes, adult daycare centers are springing up nationwide. Today, more than 1,200, a response experts say to the rapid aging of America's population.
Children now can send their ailing parents off for a day of supervised recreation. Jean Masefa has enrolled her 79-year-old mother, Sophie, in a neighborhood daycare center in Oak Park, Illinois.
I think it has given her a reason to get up in the morning.
It's lonely, just doing nothing. It's better to be with people.
Most of the elderly here are physically or mentally impaired. People like Sis Billick, learning to repot sunflower seedlings. Bill Litow, legally blind, who listens to transcriptions of the week's news. Or Viola Lipscomb, who sits quietly with friends, sewing and socializing.
Passes the time. Quietly, and nothing over excessive. Passes the time nice.
Everything we do is structured so a person can feel good and their self-esteem is built up and they can maintain some feeling of worth.
According to the National Council on Aging, adult daycare is one of the few creative responses to a national problem. The number of people over 65 is expected to reach 65 million by the year 2030, an increase of 150% from 1980.
We really do have a time bomb ticking, and I think indeed we're facing a bona fide crisis if we don't identify the kinds of programs that are needed for older people.
And while most seem at first reluctant, adult daycare is making believers out of even the most fiercely independent.
They sing, I sing, they dance, I dance. I would try and get involved in it.
Frank Courier, CBS News, Oak Park, Illinois.
One reason, of course, that Americans are living longer has to do with improvements in medical technology. That technology includes now lasers, which are growing in popularity. John Blackstone reports.
Laser beams are the death rays at the heart of Star Wars, President Reagan's strategic defense initiative. But in operating rooms, lasers are finding new uses as tools of healing. This patient, under only a local anesthetic, will have part of a blood clot vaporized with a single blast of concentrated light.
Okay, and this is where the laser probe is burned through. Yeah.
But dazzling advances in the medical application of lasers have brought problems. Some doctors use lasers not to make miracles, but to make money.
So I do believe there are abuses. I do believe there are situations where a laser may be used to take off a wart for $200, but it can be frozen off or cut off for $50.
Although laser equipment is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, there are no national standards governing which doctors can use lasers.
The word laser is translated into high technology, and yet a given surgeon with a laser in his hand is still limited by his own surgical skills.
Despite some exaggerated claims and expectations, lasers are at the frontiers of medicine. One of the most promising experimental uses is against cancer, vaporizing tumors.
We treat the patient with a dye, and the dye localizes in a tumor, and we will then bring the laser in and expose the cancer to the laser light.
The future may see lasers used to attack disease by destroying defective genes. One study predicts the use of lasers in medicine will triple by 1990 as the death ray of Star Wars establishes its place in healthcare. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
Questions will be raised in Britain's parliament tomorrow about reports a British nuclear submarine lost top-secret NATO sonar gear when a Soviet sub cut its towing cable. That incident reportedly happened last week in the Barents Sea. A Royal Navy expert is quoted as saying the Soviet sub apparently severed that cable on purpose. Coming up, a report on life in Iran, 8 years after the Ayatollah Khomeini came home.
There are lots of furnaces you can choose for your home. But for the most efficient energy, forget all but the gas furnaces. And to cut energy costs further, consider only the high-efficiency gas furnaces. Of those, only one has advanced pulse technology. The Lennox Pulse Furnace. It will make your heating more efficient.
Take it from Dave Lennox. You can save a lot of gas with a Pulse.
Attaboy, Dave!
Gas, America's best energy value.
Now, colorful stain and tough polyurethane protection in one. Poly Shades by Minwax for a beautiful finish in half the time.
Minwax makes wood beautiful.
We asked 1,000 doctors if stranded in the wilderness, which would they want? Tylenol, extra strength Tylenol, Advil, or Bayer? More doctors chose Bayer, nearly 2 to 1 over extra strength Tylenol. Bayer, the wonder drug that works wonders.
Western diplomats in Tehran said today that one of the American journalists invited to Iran recently to tour Iran-Iraq battlefields has been detained. He's identified as Gerald Seib of the Wall Street Journal. At the same time, Iran said an Israeli spy posing as a journalist and carrying a false passport had been arrested. No name was given. It was on this day in 1979 that the Ayatollah returned to Iran to launch his brand of Islamic revolution. But the war that broke out the following year has helped to blunt the drive for change, as Bill Redeker tells us in a report filed from inside Iran.
8 years after the revolution, the signs are still here, and so are the sounds. But look closely, listen carefully. The fervor has faded. The Iranian Revolution has settled down and settled in. The profound religious and political changes that transformed this nation are now taken for granted. No one seems to pay much attention to the anti-American slogans. Few are curious about the former American embassy called the Espionage Den, and there is little, if any, interest in its so-called secrets, now available in 59 volumes. For those who remember Tehran as an angry cauldron of anti-everything, 8 years have returned the city to its pre-revolutionary past. The streets are jammed with traffic and pollution. The shops are full of chicken and fruit, though more expensive than before. And the people? They seem calm and relaxed, even friendly to those of us from a country still called the Great Satan.
I have a sympathy toward Americans, and I like them. I'm not afraid to say that I like them.
8 years ago, there was a war of words with America. Today, there is a war of attrition with Iraq. And it is that fact that best explains why Iran in 1987 has, out of necessity, become a pragmatic place, willing to deal even with America for weapons and military spare parts. Virtually every family here has lost a son or two. The cemeteries, once regarded as gateways to heaven, are now national shrines of sorrow, 500,000 war dead later. The Imam, or great teacher, the Ayatollah Khomeini, who led the revolution, has aged visibly, is weary and tired, and already there are signs of a power struggle, with this man, the Speaker of Parliament, Rafsanjani, expected to come out on top. The Iranian Revolution has survived because the clergy, which initially wanted to turn back the clock 1,000 years, has instead compromised, relaxing its earlier puritanical rule for a more reasonable, more practical way of life. Bill Redeker, CBS News, Tehran.
The battle for the Iraqi port of Basra apparently continues to rage, but Iraq's President Saddam Hussein tonight claimed that Iraqi troops have, quote, broken the back of the Iranian offensive. A car bomb today in the Afghan capital of Kabul killed as many as 6 people. That happened near the Interior Ministry and a security police office. Coming up, the anniversary of a once controversial Paris museum that has become Europe's #1 tourist attraction.
When you get a cold or an allergy,
you need some herbal tea.
You also get a lot of advice.
What you want to do is feed a cold.
A lot of advice.
Take duties and call me in the morning.
But the best advice is what doctors have said millions of times. Take Dimetap. Dimetap in non-prescription formulas brings proven relief. So take the advice of doctors and pharmacists.
The tea works. Huh?
And take Dimetap, the best advice you can take.
Konica Tough. Konica's Royal Copiers are tough. Reliability and dependability have earned them a tough reputation. Konica's Royal Copiers, the right choice for tough jobs.
The tax laws are changing. The deductions on interest are changing. So maybe you should apply for a card that doesn't charge interest. The American Express card. Apply over the phone by calling 1-800-THE-CARD.
We're in Boston at world-famous Maison Robert restaurant. And we're secretly replacing Robert's freshly ground coffee with mountain-grown Folgers crystals. Will it be rich enough?
Delicious.
It's
Folgers crystals?
I'm shocked.
Why?
Because, I tell you, he only drinks fresh brewed. He can talk about how great the coffee's been tonight. This tastes like fresh ground coffee.
Mountain-grown Folgers crystals. Coffee rich enough to be served in America's finest restaurants.
This tastes just like fresh brewed to me. I can't believe it.
The word today in Tinseltown, hooray, hooray for Hollywood, and happy birthday. A serious part of the celebration of Hollywood's 100th birthday, the unveiling along the Walk of Fame of star number 1,842 for actress Natalie Wood, late wife of actor Robert Wagner. And there was another anniversary today, the 10th anniversary of a building that former French President Georges Pompidou once said, quote, would make them scream. It did. Some still say it's an architectural disaster. But as David Andelman reports, a decade later, the Pompidou Art Center has a very special role in Paris.
When it opened, many called it the world's first downtown oil refinery. Some still do. But now, 10 years old, Paris's Pompidou Center has become the core of an entire culture and society. Often bizarre, but certainly original.
The art is fun, but it's an experience being here because of all the sideshow acts that are outside all the time.
I don't know, I think it's different for Paris. Very different for Paris.
Still, for all its bizarre features, it remains the most visited monument in Europe. More people pass through its gates each year than the Louvre or the Eiffel Tower. More visitors, in fact, than any public monument except Disneyland. But if it hasn't turned into the trendsetter of avant-garde, it has become a world-class museum that has shaped and guided the world of modern art for a half-generation. Part of the Beaubourg's success is that it has something for everybody in the cultural world. Its music center under Pierre Boulez, a leader in avant-garde music. Its galleries home to the world of the 20th century. Picasso and Chagall, Matisse and Kandinsky, Andy Warhol, and others often too bizarre to mention. Inside the galleries and outside. David Andelman, CBS News, Paris.
Sort of nice. That's the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather will be here tomorrow, of course, and later tonight, Charles Osgood with the CBS Sunday Night News. I'm Susan Spencer. Have a good week.
What was that? The boogeyman from the Black Lagoon. There's something out there. Don't worry, as long as the lights are on, we're fine.
What do we do now?
Run for your life!
It's time to change your light bulb. Philips Longer Life Square bulbs last 33% longer than ordinary round bulbs.
I'm not an actor. I'm just a guy, 30 years old, who had a heart attack. I'm okay now, but I want to tell you one thing I learned from my doctor. Medical studies prove that a diet low in fats and cholesterol with foods like Fleischmann's margarine can actually help reduce the level of cholesterol already in your body. And that's one way you can help reduce your risk of heart disease. I thought you'd like to know that. Take care.
Fleischmann's margarine. Ask your doctor.
Mais ça remue toujours et ça calope. Et ça reste comme votre poing rempli de comme poing sans point ni loi. Et de justifier qui viennent pour les le remplir dans le plat. Car, il faut faire approche du paradis enfer. Fais attention, pauvre crétin, car le bandit.
I'm Faith Daniels. Tax time. More taxing than ever with the new tax laws. So how do you avoid an audit? Ken Pruitt has some tips tomorrow on the CBS Morning News.
This is CBS.
TV8 News takes you there. TV8's Allison Gilman reports Iowa's first piggyback transplant operation gives a Des Moines man 2 hearts. At the firing range, TV8's Mary Bach reports the Des Moines Police Department is considering converting to semi-automatic pistols. And on the windy shore of Lake Red Rock, TV8's Rick Swalwell finds a student-built Eagle condo climbing into the sky. Be a part of it all. News Alive on TV8.
Catch the news alive, TV8. Be a part of it all.
Eagles, bluebirds, otters,
These are the characters in a wonderful story, The Chickadee Checkoff. In the 4 years since the program began, Iowans have given over $700,000 to help non-game wildlife. But the story is just beginning. Non-game wildlife still needs your help. Remember the Chickadee Checkoff on your state tax form. It's your chance to be a part of a